privilege of not only working with Donovan and a couple of his cohorts, but also I get the privilege of introducing him today. So I want to welcome Donovan to the stage, or pseudo-stage. And he's been with PeaceJam since 2006. He's really evolved throughout the program, and I'm really excited for him to share his talk on inspiring young peacemakers. So welcome, Donovan, to the stage.
It was a simple idea, putting young people together with Nobel Peace Prize winners. On this spot, in the spring of 1994, I saw 4 young Latino males carrying guns. These guys were my neighbors. These guys lived across the street from me for years. I said, hey guys, come over here. I want to talk to you for a second. They came on and said, what's up? I said, what are you doing with a gun? They said, well, we have a business. I said, well, what do you need the gun for? They said, to protect our turf. And I said, to have a business, you got to be pretty smart. And I haven't seen you guys go to school in 3 years. So I asked them a question, who's the President of the United States? They said, we don't know, and we don't care, because the President of the United States doesn't represent our interests. We tripped over the topic of South Africa, and these young men went off. They went, oh yeah, Archbishop Desmond Tutu's this little guy, and he stood up in front of the guns of apartheid. He's so bad, he went to jail, they did everything, and he never carried a gun. And I said, why don't you be a little bit more like Desmond Tutu and not carry a gun? So I had this idea to put young people together with Nobel Peace Prize winners in an education program that was based on service learning that I didn't know where to start. I had no one to turn to until I remembered this woman. And so I started talking to her about it every day, driving her crazy, saying, Nobel Peace Laureates and youth, kids and Nobel Peace Prize winners, kids and Nobel Peace Prize winners, kids.
You would not stop.
I probably drove her crazy.
Talking, you did. And he just was so excited about the idea that finally I said, well, you know what? Yeah, I'll help. We put the plan together. We contacted the chief of staff for the Dalai Lama, and he said yes.
Yes, come to India, meet the Dalai Lama, and present him with your idea. So I had $1.79 in my bank account at the time, being a poor person, and I was going around to my friends saying, hey, could you lend me $10, $20 so I could buy a round trip ticket to India? Because I have a meeting with the Dalai Lama. And they laughed in my face.
Everybody laughed. No one believed we had this meeting, but somehow we were able to convince enough people to lend us the money so that we could fly to India, meet with the Dalai Lama. He loved the idea, and he said, yes, I will do this.
And he wanted us also to contact other Nobel Peace Prize winners who were friends of his, so young people could study these other Nobel Peace Prize winners to get a different perspective on the world.
So we ended up back here in Denver, Colorado, cold calling Nobel Peace Prize winners.
Calling long distance information in Cape Town, South Africa. Can you hook me up with Archbishop Desmond Tutu? And I said, man, you're crazy. If somebody as flawed and average as us can get a program up and running like this, imagine what you can do.
So it's simple. Nobel laureates and young people. It's a great idea. It's a huge idea. Why do we do it? We do it to save the world. It's that simple. We do it to change the world, to make it a better place. And we do it through action. It sounds enormous, right? It sounds crazy. Why would these 13 different Nobel Peace Prize winners from across the world come and work with young people, face to face, who they have no direct connection with other than through this program? Why would they invest their time? And it's because they helped to develop this program. These Nobel laureates helped to develop PeaceJam. So PeaceJam works with 3 fundamental tenets: education, inspiration, and action, in an effort to make change. So in terms of education, we offer a variety of curricular activities and programs for a whole bunch of ages, from ages 5 through 25. Inspiration, we draw that directly from 13 Nobel Peace Prize winners who sit as our international board. And then we do action through a really intensive service learning program where students are building service projects that affect their local community based on what's needed there. So when we talk about education, we're talking about those programs that I mentioned before. 5 through 25. Kindergarten through 5th grade in our juniors program. 6th through 8th in our leaders. 9th through 12th in our ambassadors program. College-age students through our scholars program. And then we have a juvenile justice program that works with young people who are either incarcerated or involved in the justice system one way or another. These programs, they serve a little bit differently than what we're used to. When we think about education, we oftentimes think about math, history, science, English, literature, all of the sort of normal subjects that you studied when you were a kid, that I studied when I was a kid. And those have served us moderately well up to this point. You know, our young people are learning the basics of science, how to further research, they're learning how to communicate, and they're learning about the acts of the past. We teach our young people these topics so that they can make new scientific breakthroughs, new medical breakthroughs, so that they can further our culture and our development as a people and as a species. And so that they learn about the acts of the past so that they can build on the good, and so that they don't repeat the atrocities that have been committed in our history. But why is it that we focus on war? Why is it that we always focus on conflict? Why is it that we are so driven to study violence, oppression, prejudice? Why is it that that's the center of our academic research? I can't tell you how many times I studied World War II. I can't tell you how many times I studied the Civil War. I can't tell you how many times war was reinforced in my education as a young person. And I think that most of you can reflect on that as well. Now, through PeaceJam, we have the opportunity to utilize a pre-constructed, completely flexible and modular curricular program that's centered around peace. It utilizes 21st century educational skills, and it's focused around this idea of service. And it's all focused around the core curriculum that has been adopted by so many states in our country. So when we're looking at this, we have to approach it differently for every age group, obviously. But each program focuses on the lives of our Nobel laureates as models for peace building. So in our juniors program, you know, we look at the childhood stories of the laureates, and we look at them as examples of characteristics of peace builders. And not only do we look at them as examples, but we tie in practical skills that these young people can use in their daily lives to build peace in their communities as 5-year-olds. I mean, let's talk about that. When you're talking to a 5-year-old about peace, when you're talking to them about the Dalai Lama, and you say, the Dalai Lama, well now he's a fantastic example of compassion and caring. Well, that's a fantastic attribute. Why wouldn't anyone want to be that way? But how do we give them a tool to actually demonstrate that to their friends? How do we actually show them? And actually, you mentioned it before. We talk about active listening. We talk about reflective listening. We teach them this starting at age 5, so that when they're age 20, they're pros. They're going to come into a situation and they're going to know how to respond to the person they're conversing with, how to interact in a nonviolent way. The idea is that for each of these 13 laureates, we can give a practical skill to these young people to share that information and to model that characteristic. So when we look at leaders, the leaders program is our middle school age. That's where we look at the adolescent stories of the Nobel laureates. So what was the Dalai Lama doing when he was 15? Oh, well, he had just become the religious and political leader of his entire people and had to lead them in fleeing their country to escape genocide. Well, that gives you a sense of perspective as a young person, first of all. And to do it in a completely nonviolent way is another level of that. But the other thing about this particular program, and it's one of my favorites of what we do, is that it's also a time when young people are going through that really intense developmental stage of who am I, what do I care about, and why should I care about what you're telling me? How many 13-year-olds do you know who you would label in those negative words as rebellious? You know, rebellion is really just a self-investigation. It's really just a reevaluation of what we've been told and why are we believing it. So in the leaders curriculum, we look and encourage young people to develop their own sense of self and individuality, and also their sense of belonging and community on a local level. And then finally, investigating and looking at their role on the global stage and how they can contribute to the world around them. So again, it's this combination of inspirational stories and practical skills that's really the key here. So then finally in the ambassadors level, on that high school level, and then on in the scholars as well, we focus on developing cohesive groups equipped with the skills needed to be effective change makers. They explore areas of social justice like identity and difference, privilege and power, peace and violence. What do those really mean? How do they experience it in themselves? How do they experience it in their friends? How do they experience it in the world around them? How does this play out? And how am I a part of it? I don't know about you guys, I never heard about systems of oppression, that kind of technical term. I never heard about, really talking about power and privilege in terms of a comparison until I was well into college. I heard about the civil rights movement, but I never really investigated what that was about other than this word racism. What did that really mean? But now the second part of the ambassadors program, and this is where a lot of people get really excited, revolves around our annual conferences. So PeaceJam ambassadors every year will have the opportunity to meet one of our Nobel laureates face to face. And not just meet them, but work hand in hand with them. So they get to come to these conferences, they get to meet a Nobel Peace Prize winner, they get to present to them the work that they're doing, and they get to work side by side in service with one of these Nobel laureates. Now I was a young person in this program, and I will tell you right now that meeting a Nobel Prize winner, and today is no different than the first day that I met Betty Williams. My sister, who's here, is the one who pulled me into this whole program. It's an incredible experience unto itself. But to be a young person and to step on stage and to see this international leaders look of admiration and approval for the work that you're doing in your community is life-changing. Suddenly, it's clear that your opinion and your actions really matter and that they can really take effect and change the world. Because it's not just your own ideas. Suddenly, there's this person who's a hero who's telling you, yeah, what you're doing matters, and I love what you're doing. So, like I said, we talk about service learning. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with the term service learning, it's an educational philosophy that combines academic learning with community service to create a more holistic and practical approach that really applies young people in a really intensive way. So it happens, again, in various levels at various different capabilities based on what ages our students are. In the juniors program, we oftentimes see young people making presentations about Nobel laureates to the elderly, or creating children's books to share the skills that they've been learning in their program with other young people, and they'll actually go and read those books to other young kids, which is really great. But every juniors module, because again, it's a completely flexible and adaptable program that you can use one or all of our modules in your classroom or in your youth organization. Each module has recommendations for service activities that these young children can do, but we actually encourage the students, these young students, to develop their own ideas about how they can do service through both journaling and through discussion. Now when we move into leaders and ambassadors, though, we really dig deeper into the service aspect. Students conduct needs assessments and design projects that link their passions and their interests with the problems that their own communities are facing right there and then. Now, we really push them and say it's the trick about these projects is that we want you to address root causes. We want you to learn what a root cause is. We want you to address those root causes. We don't want you to just address a symptom of the problem. We want you to find what's going on and really work there. So one of my favorite examples of this is from one of our groups in Colorado. The kids, they were high schoolers, they started volunteering in one of the biggest food pantries in the greater Boulder area. They were volunteering there, they were really excited, they felt like they were doing a really great job. And they said, well, this is our service project, this is what we'll do. And their advisor, we don't call them teachers, we call them advisors, because the idea is that the young people are leading this program. Their advisor said, well, hold on, is this really root cause? Like, what are you doing that's really addressing the cause of the problem? Is the cause of the problem that people don't have food? And they said, well, no, that's a symptom. Well, how do we find out what the real cause of the problem, what the real root of the situation here? They said, well, we need to ask the people. And so how do we get to ask the people who have this need? how do we get to ask them what the problem is? And they said, well, what do you think is the best idea of how to approach it? Or what do you think? There's always that question coming back to these young people. And they said, well, we should find out if it's okay for us to interview them. And so they went to the director of the food pantry. They asked permission to interview people who were coming who were willing to be interviewed. They got approval right away, of course. And these young people started interviewing families that were coming to the food pantry for food. And they said, well, why do you need to come here? And they said, the first answer they got was, we don't have any money. They said, well, why don't you have any money? They said, well, we don't have any jobs. And they said, well, why don't you have any jobs? Is it because you had jobs but you lost them? Or is it because you didn't ever have a job? And over again, they were finding that it was because these individuals, these families that were coming didn't really know how to apply for a job. They didn't have access to computers. They didn't have email accounts. They didn't have all of these resources that so many of us take for granted these days. So the kids decided that they would train these people in how to apply for jobs. The local superstores, the major employers, they only accepted online applications. Nobody was using paper. So they got computers donated to the food bank. They got a room allocated. They set up these computers there. And then they learned how to help these people and help train these people in how to set up their email accounts, how to use monster.com, how to make a resume, how to apply for these jobs. And they started holding these job training sessions, these email and job training sessions for the families using the food pantry. After just 2 sessions of these trainings, the director of the food pantry reported a 20% reduction in need at the food pantry. 20% out of 2 sessions that these young people led. It's incredible. And these projects that these young people lead are all part of this, what you see in front of you, which is called the Global Call to Action. This is a challenge that our laureates have issued to the youth of the world. Basically, they've said, we want 1 billion acts of peace and service in this world, and we want them led by young people, addressing what they see as the top 10 most pressing issues facing our world. And you look at these, and they're enormous. Ending extreme poverty, securing equal access to water and other natural resources, ending racism and hate. These are enormous topics. But that serves the youth, because the youth can look at their community and say, what is going on? When they do their needs assessment, where do the problems fall within these big topics? You know, where does bullying fall? Well, breaking the cycle of violence. You know, where does this food issue fall? And you know, it could be in any of them. It could be in investing in true human security. It could be in securing equal access to water and other natural resources. So we have this project called the Global Call to Action, and young people get involved. And we have over 2 million acts of service already, and more come in every single day. And these kids can share their projects online on our website and show each other what they're doing. They get to share their projects, their strategies, compare and contrast notes, and really dig deep and go forward. So the laureates have done this, and we learn about the laureates' lives as this source of inspiration. You know, we learn about them as examples of peace throughout history and sources of inspiration that we can look to. The thing is, though, that these laureates are still alive. So often, when we learn about heroes in this world, they're long dead. You know, even looking at Martin Luther King, looking at Gandhi, who were honestly not that long ago, they're gone in terms of their living forms and their ability to interact. But these 13 people right here are still alive, except for Sir Joseph Rothman, unfortunately. And they are invested. So when we look at them, we see that these heroes are flesh and blood, and the young people get to meet them face to face. You know, one of our teachers in our leaders program says that every time that she brings young people to our conference, and they're her 8th graders, they cannot believe that they are actually going to meet the person they've been studying all year. They can't believe it, and they don't believe it until they're in the room with the person. They just, it's just beyond them. So when these kids meet these inspirational figures, they see them as humans with human flaws, and yet they've accomplished such great things. But what these laureates remind us is that they're not the only sources of inspiration in PeaceJam. So you see, the young people themselves are all inspirational individuals. Each of these young people shows one another about the power of action and the ability that young people have to make a difference. Our young people aren't the leaders of tomorrow. Instead, they're leaders right now that we need to be standing right beside and walking down the road to peace with. So what's the point of this? Well, I said it before. The point is to save the world. And I say that to you, and you might think that I'm idealistic, that I'm naive, that I just don't see how it could really happen. But in this era, when we have too many shootings in schools, too many bombings in public places, when bullying has become an all too commonplace standard in our young people's lives, and all too often with deadly consequences, when we see our world constantly enmeshed in conflict, this is the time that we need programs like this one in our schools and in our communities. Someone once asked me, why PeaceJam? Why this organization? Why not through Greenpeace? Why not through the Peace Corps? Why not through Big Brothers Big Sisters? They're all doing things that are similar to this. And I had to take a second and think about it. I had to really, really think about that answer, because it's more than giving back to an organization that changed my life. It's that I have come through this program to truly believe that the conditions for world peace can be built in my lifetime. And I think that PeaceJam is one of the best tools to help make that happen. Now, when I say that, I'm not talking about some grand event that'll make the world a paradise. Peace is a continual process. It takes effort, it takes compromise, it takes compassion and steadfastness. It's a process that demands the best of all of us and requires action. PeaceJam offers us an opportunity to create true systemic change through educating and empowering our youth. Imagine a world for a second with a generation of people who have grown up prioritizing peace, service, and taking nonviolent action to make positive change. Now imagine 2 or 3 generations of people who all feel the same way. I'm going to issue that call to action that Alex has talked to us about, and say that I'll invite every single person in this room to work with us in really setting forward to take action and make sure that our young people learn how to build and sustain peace right now. In PeaceJam we have a saying, which is that change starts here. And it does. It starts right here, and it starts with each and every one of you, and it starts with each and every one of them, and it starts with each and every young person who we can talk to about how they can truly change the world.